I was standing in front of the old wooden door of the small coffee shop tucked away in an alley in Cambridge, the place where my fiancée and I had our first date. The rich aroma of roasted coffee wafted out from inside, mingling with the crisp chill of a Boston autumn afternoon. I pushed the door open, and the little bell jingled like a familiar greeting. My fiancée, Lila, was already there, sitting at our usual corner table by the window, where the pale light from the gray sky fell on her glossy brown hair. She was wearing a dark green sweater, her hands clasped tightly together, her gaze flicking toward me before quickly turning to look outside as if she were waiting for someone else. "Lila," I called softly, my voice faltering with nervousness. It had been so long since I'd seen her. My endless night shifts and her packed schedule at Harvard Medical School had made our moments together increasingly rare. But today, I was here because she had texted me saying there was something important. I thought perhaps it was about her graduation, the day we'd both been waiting for over the past 5 years. She looked up, her eyes flashing with a hint of unease before forcing a strained smile. "Colton, you're here. Sit down." Her voice was soft, but there was something cold in it. Nothing like the times she used to throw her arms around me, whispering that I was her whole world. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. My hands unconsciously gripped my old baseball cap, the one I always wore outside to hide my sweaty, disheveled hair after night shifts. "How are you? Graduation's coming up soon, right? I've taken a day off to be there. I want to see you smiling on that stage, Lila. You deserve it." She fell silent, her lips pressed tightly together. I noticed she wasn't looking me in the eye, just staring down, fiddling with the silver spoon in her cappuccino. The air between us suddenly grew heavy as if an invisible wall was rising. I waited, but the silence stretched on, making my chest start to ache. "Colton," she finally said, her voice low and steady as if she'd rehearsed it. "I want to talk about graduation. I don't think you should come." I froze as if someone had just slapped me across the face. "Not come? What do you mean, Lila?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but my heart was pounding, threatening to burst out of my chest. She took a deep breath, then looked up at me. Her eyes were sharp and cold, devoid of any warmth from the old days. "You know, it's an important day for me. My family will be there, my friends, my professors. Important people I don't want." She hesitated as if searching for words to hurt me as little as possible. But then, she said it bluntly, like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. "I don't want them to know my fiancé is a janitor." I felt the blood in my heart stop flowing. The word janitor echoed in my head, short and cruel. I looked at her, hoping it was just a slip of the tongue, that she'd laugh and say she was only joking. But no. Lila sat there, her gaze resolute, as if she'd thought this through carefully before saying it. You mean it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. My throat felt blocked, like a stone was lodged in it. She nodded without hesitation. "Colton, you have to understand. I'm about to become a doctor. I can't let people know I'm engaged to someone like you. They'll judge me. They'll think I don't deserve what I've achieved." Every word she said was like salt in my wounds. I wanted to shout, to ask her what the past 5 years meant to her. The nights I worked myself to exhaustion, the money I sent to cover her tuition, her books, her dorm fees. What did it all mean to her? But I couldn't speak. I just sat there, numb, watching the woman I loved more than myself turn into a stranger. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know what else to do. "All right, Lila," I said, my voice so soft I could barely hear it myself. "If that's what you want." She didn't respond, just looked at me with eyes that mixed relief with a fleeting trace of guilt. I stood up, my legs heavy as if weighed down by stones. I wanted to turn back, to tell her I'd sacrificed my youth for her, that I'd believed her promise that one day she'd make me proud. But I couldn't. I just walked out of the cafe in silence, the door's bell jingling like a bitter goodbye. I returned to my tiny rented apartment in South Boston, where the neon lights from the street outside cast faint, blurry streaks on the old wooden floor. The room was so small it barely fit a single bed, a wooden table, and an old wardrobe holding a few worn-out clothes. I collapsed into a chair, my trembling hands opening the old notebook I'd kept for the past 5 years. The notebook was nothing special, just a cheap leather-bound one I'd bought at a convenience store. But inside it held my entire world. The bills I'd paid for Lila, the money transfer receipts, the little notes about the amounts I'd sent. I flipped through the pages, the scribbled lines, the carefully recorded numbers. Each page was a piece of memory. The nights I cleaned offices until 3 in the morning. The days I ate instant noodles to save every penny for her. I remembered the first time I met Lila at a volunteer event at a community hospital. She was a first-year student, her eyes bright with passion as she talked about her dream of becoming a doctor. I was a 23-year-old janitor with nothing but rough hands and a heart full of fire. But she smiled at me, sat with me during simple lunches with sandwiches, held my hand under the Boston autumn rain, and said she loved me, that she needed nothing but my honest love. "When I become a doctor, Colton," she'd said, her voice full of determination, "I'll make you proud. We'll build a future together." I believed her, completely. I dropped out of the technical course I'd once dreamed of because I wanted to work right away, to earn money so she wouldn't worry about tuition. I worked day and night, fixing equipment by day and cleaning offices by night. I didn't mind, because every time I saw Lila inch closer to her dream, I felt happy. I thought our love was strong enough to bridge any gap between a janitor and a Harvard medical student. But now, sitting in this empty room, I realized I was wrong. Her promises, the sleepless nights, the money I'd scrimped and saved, it was all just a cruel joke. She didn't want me at her big day, didn't want me standing beside her when she received her diploma. I, who had given my youth to lift her up, was now someone she wanted to hide. I closed the notebook, a lump choking my throat. Outside, Boston was still bustling, cars passing, lights blinking. But in this room, my world had just collapsed. I looked at the engagement ring on my finger, the cheap one I'd saved for a year to buy. I'd thought it was a symbol of our love, but now it was just a meaningless object, a reminder that I'd loved someone who was never truly mine. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street. I didn't cry. I was too exhausted for tears. But inside, a storm was raging. I wondered, had I traded my entire life for a dream that would never come true? Did Lila ever love me? Or was it all just sweet lies to get what she wanted? I had no answers, but I knew that tomorrow I'd still go to work, still clean those long hallways in the dark, still keep living. Because that's who I am, Colton Reed, a 28-year-old janitor who loved with all his heart and is now learning to face the greatest pain of his life. On Lila's graduation day, I stood quietly at the far corner of Harvard Yard, where hundreds of people gathered under the pale sunlight of an autumn morning. The air buzzed with laughter, applause, and the bright bouquets clutched in families' hands. I had no invitation to enter the main area, nor any intention of pushing through the crowd. Lila had made it clear she didn't want me there, and I respected that, even though my heart still twisted every time I recalled her words in the cafe that day. But I couldn't stay away. I wanted to see her even from a distance in the moment she touched the dream we had both sacrificed so many years to achieve. I stood behind a row of ancient oak trees, my baseball cap pulled low over my tired eyes. On the stage, Lila appeared, radiant in the crimson gown of Harvard Medical School. I smiled silently, feeling as though every sleepless night cleaning offices, every dollar I'd scrimped and sent her had all been worth it. She had done it. Lila Westbrook, the girl I loved, was now a doctor. I stood there, my chest warming with pride, even knowing she didn't want me to be part of this day. I told myself that just seeing her happy, just knowing my sacrifices hadn't been in vain, was enough. I turned to leave before she could spot me, but my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Lila. "Colton, are you free? I want to meet. The cafe near Harvard Square, 3 p.m., okay?" My heart pounded. She wanted to see me? After the cold words from before, I didn't dare hope for much, but a part of me still longed to hear her say thank you, or at least see her smile like she used to. I hurried to a small flower shop on the way and picked out a bouquet of sunflowers, the kind she once said she loved for their simplicity. Holding the flowers, I felt lighter, thinking this might be a joyful meeting where we could set aside misunderstandings and start anew. The cafe near Harvard Square was more crowded than I'd expected, filled with groups of freshly graduated students laughing loudly, hugging, and taking photos. I stepped inside and found Lila in our usual corner at the table by the window. But this time she wasn't wearing the green sweater from before. She had changed into something formal, a fitted black dress, her hair loose and natural, but her face carried a distance I'd never seen. She looked up as I approached, offering a faint smile devoid of warmth. "Colton?" she said, as if speaking to a casual acquaintance, not the man she'd been engaged to for 3 years. I forced a smile and placed the sunflowers on the table, hoping they'd make her happy. "Congratulations, Lila. Today you were incredible." My voice trembled slightly. "I saw you on stage. You deserve all of this." She nodded faintly, but her eyes avoided mine, glancing at the flowers before quickly pushing them aside as if they were an unwanted trinket. "Thank you," she said, her tone flat. The air between us grew heavy, like a storm about to break. I sat down, unease rising in my chest. "Lila, is something wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You said you wanted to meet to talk. What is it?" She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly on the table. She still wouldn't look me in the eye, just stared down as if searching for a way to say something difficult. "Colton," she began, her voice low and resolute, "I think we should break up." I felt the world around me grind to a halt. The sounds of the cafe, the laughter, the clinking of cups, the soft background music, all faded, leaving only Lila's voice echoing in my head. "Break up?" I stared at her, searching for any sign she was joking, that this was just an impulsive moment. But no. Her eyes were cold, unwavering, as if she'd decided long ago. What are you saying, Lila?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why? What happened? Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head, still avoiding my gaze. "It's not that you did anything wrong. I've just thought about it a lot. Our relationship, it doesn't fit anymore. I don't feel the way I used to." It felt like someone was crushing my heart. "Doesn't fit?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Lila, I've spent the last 5 years supporting you. I worked day and night, sent money for your studies, for you to become a doctor. You say it doesn't fit, but have you thought about everything we've been through together?" She stayed silent, her lips pressed tight. I waited, hoping she'd say something. An explanation, a reason, anything to help me understand why she'd changed. But she just sat there, her eyes drifting away as if I no longer existed in her world. "I'm sorry, Colton," she finally said, her voice soft but icy. "But I think we both deserve our own paths. I hope someday we can be friends." "Friends?" I wanted to scream, to ask how I could be friends with someone who'd torn my heart apart. But I couldn't speak. I just looked at her, at the girl I'd thought would be my whole life, now sitting before me, a stranger. Then, in a moment that left me numb, Lila raised her hand and slowly slipped the engagement ring off her finger. That ring, the cheap one I'd saved for an entire year to buy, now lay alone on the table, glinting weakly under the cafe's lights. She pushed it toward me, gently but firmly, as if erasing every memory between us. "I think you should keep it," she said, her voice emotionless. "Thank you for everything, Colton. But I have to move on." I stared at the ring, then at her. I wanted to say something, to ask what the past 5 years meant to her, whether my love, the nights I'd exhausted myself for her, were worth throwing away so easily. But I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling everything around me collapse. Lila stood up, picking up her purse and the sunflowers I'd brought. She didn't look back, just walked out of the cafe, her slender figure melting into the crowd outside. The door's bell jingled like a final knife cutting through my last shred of hope. I sat there alone in the crowded cafe. The ring lay on the table, a silent reminder of what I'd lost. Not just Lila, not just the love I'd poured my heart into building, but the belief that true love could overcome any distance. I picked up the ring, gripping it tightly, the cold metal biting into my skin. Outside, Boston still bustled. Sunlight still streamed through the windows, but inside me everything had gone dark. I didn't know why Lila had changed, what had made her turn her back on me, but I knew one thing. The girl I loved, the one I'd sacrificed my youth to lift up, was now gone, taking with her the world I'd once believed in. I stood up, slipped the ring into my jacket pocket and walked out of the cafe. I didn't know where I was going or how I'd move forward after today. I walked along the familiar streets of South Boston, my feet heavy as if weighed down with lead, the engagement ring in my jacket pocket brushing against my chest with every step. A relentless reminder of what had just happened. I stopped at a street corner, leaning my back against the cold brick wall, breathing heavily. The girl who once promised to make me proud had turned away, disowning me as if I had never existed. Her words of breakup from the cafe still echoed in my mind, cold and final. I watched the stream of people passing by, unfamiliar faces, carefree smiles. I wondered, had any of them ever loved someone so much that they traded their entire youth, only to be left behind like me? Then it hit me. Perhaps I had indeed traded my youth, my strength and my faith for a dream that was no longer mine. Lila had achieved her dream, but I, the one who had carried her the whole way, was discarded, like an unnecessary part of a past she wanted to erase. I merged into the bustling crowd and asked myself, could I find myself again, after losing everything for someone who no longer needed me? One evening after my shift, a few weeks since Lila left me, I collapsed into a chair, sweat still soaking my shirt, and scrolled through my phone to kill time. I rarely touch social media, but that night I accidentally tapped on a post shared thousands of times on a Boston community page. The headline made my heart clench. Young female doctor overcomes loss to pursue her dream. I frowned, curious, and then, like a punch straight to the face, I saw her name, Lila Westbrook. I clicked the article, my hands trembling. A photo appeared. Lila in a white coat standing in front of a small clinic called Westbrook Family Care. She was smiling, but it wasn't the innocent smile I once loved. It was a calculated, perfect smile, as if she were performing for the world. I started reading, and every line cut deeper into my chest. Lila Westbrook, a resilient young doctor, has overcome the greatest losses of her life to pursue her dream of saving lives. Her fiancé, the love of her life, tragically passed away in a heartbreaking accident not long ago. Her parents are also battling illness, leaving her with massive debt from tuition and living expenses. But Lila never gave up. She worked tirelessly, studied relentlessly, and now she has opened her own clinic to continue the dream her fiancé once supported. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. Fiancé passed away. I reread every word, every sentence, hoping I'd misunderstood. But no, the article was clear. I, Colton Reed, was now, in the eyes of the world, a dead man. My blood ran cold, my heart pounded, and a pain deeper than before surged through me, as if Lila hadn't just left me but erased my very existence to craft a story for herself. I scrolled to the comments, thousands of shares, hundreds of praises. So inspiring. She's so strong. I want to donate to help her. Someone had set up a fundraiser urging people to contribute so Lila could pay off her debts faster. Another post from Lila herself, dripping with emotion. His dream lives on in me. Every day I work to make him proud, even though he's no longer here. I stared at the attached photo. Lila standing in front of the clinic, hand over her heart, eyes glistening, as if she truly carried a profound loss. I sat there, the phone slipping onto the table, my hands shaking. To the world, I was a ghost, a tragic tale Lila had spun to garner sympathy. She had turned my love, the nights I exhausted myself cleaning, the dollars I scraped together for her, into a tool to build her reputation. I didn't know how to feel. Devastated, furious, or just empty. All I knew was that the girl I once loved, the one I'd given my youth to lift up, was now shining atop the ashes of my life. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the phone screen, rereading the article. Local news outlets picked up the story, praising Lila as a symbol of resilience. News sites posted photos of her in her white coat, radiant smile, and emotional pieces about her journey overcoming loss. Patients flocked to Westbrook Family Care, not just because she was a doctor, but because they were moved by the story she told. Some articles even quoted her. "I do it all for him. He always wanted me to be a doctor, and I won't let that dream die." Every word she said carved another wound into my heart. I remembered the days I worked until I collapsed, my hands swollen from gripping the mop too long, eating sparingly to save every penny for her. I remembered her calls, her voice full of gratitude, saying she couldn't have done it without me. But now, everything I'd done, every sacrifice, had been twisted into a lie to win pity and fame. I looked out the window where Boston's lights still blazed and wondered, how could I keep living, knowing the girl I loved hadn't just left me but buried me under a fabricated story? I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let Lila keep using me as a prop. I couldn't let her build her entire world on lies while I, the one who gave her my heart, was forgotten like a ghost. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt anger creeping into my chest. I resolved not to let this end like this. Leela might think she'd erased me from her life, but I was still alive, and I would make her face the truth about me, about my love, and about what she had done. One late afternoon, as the crimson sunset draped over Boston's streets, I stood in front of Westbrook Family Care. The small sign with its elegant lettering gleamed under the lights, like a declaration of Lila's success. But to me, it was a bitter reminder of betrayal. I took a deep breath, clenching my fists in my jacket pockets where the engagement ring still lay, cold as an unhealing scar. I didn't know what I would say. I only knew I couldn't keep living buried under the lies she had woven. I pushed the door open. The little bell jingled, echoing in the quiet space. The clinic was empty, no patients, just white neon light pouring over pristine walls. Lila sat behind the reception desk, tidying a stack of files, her face tired yet smug. She wore her white coat, hair tied high, looking like a perfect version of herself, the version all of Boston now admired. But when she looked up and saw me, her eyes froze, the smile on her lips vanishing. She stiffened, still clutching the files as if grasping for something to steady herself. "Colton?" Her voice trembled slightly, laced with surprise and a hint of panic. What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, my old shoes squeaking on the polished tile floor. I looked straight into her eyes, trying to keep my voice calm despite the rage boiling in my chest. "Leela, I read your article. The story about your fiancé who died in an accident. You said I was dead, that you were overcoming loss to become a doctor. You turned me into a tool to win the world's pity. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her face paled, but only for a moment. She quickly regained her composure, set the files down, and stood tall, her gaze icy. "Colton, you've misunderstood," she said evenly, as if she'd rehearsed the line. "It was just a way to tell the story, to inspire people. I didn't mean to hurt you." "Inspire people?" I repeated, my voice rising, unable to hold back anymore. "You said I was dead, Lila. You turned the years I worked myself to exhaustion, the money I sent for your studies, into a lie to raise donations, to build this clinic. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" She pressed her lips together, her eyes darting away, but I didn't stop. I stepped closer, only a small desk between us. "I believed you, Lila. I believed you when you said you loved me, that you didn't need money, just my love. I worked day and night, ate scraps, wore old clothes so you could become a doctor. And now you stand here in a clinic built on the money of people who believed your lies, and what am I to you? A ghost?" Lila clenched her fists, struggling to stay calm, but I saw her fingers tremble. She took a deep breath, then met my eyes, no longer avoiding but defiant. "Colton, you don't understand," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Did you think I wanted to stay tied to a floor cleaner forever? I tried, but don't you see? We're too different. You have no future, no ambition. I couldn't keep dragging that poor past behind me." Her words hit me like a slap. I stood frozen, feeling the blood drain from my veins. "A floor cleaner," I echoed, my voice hoarse. "That's how you see me, Lila? After everything I did for you?" She laughed, a dry, mocking laugh. "Colton, you think you did all that for me, but really you did it to keep me. I didn't want to live forever in your world. Cramped apartments, night shifts, days with nothing but instant oatmeal. Yes, I lied, but it was to start over, to escape the pitiful image of standing next to you. Don't you see? I deserve more." My chest ached as if someone were crushing my heart. The girl in front of me was no longer the Lila I loved. The one who held my hand in the rain, who wrote letters thanking me for being there. This was a cold, arrogant Lila, her eyes filled with hollow ambition. I wanted to shout, to tell her I'd given her everything, that I'd traded my youth for her dream. But I couldn't speak. I just stood there, bitterly realizing that my love in her eyes wasn't worth a dime. I turned to leave, unwilling to continue this confrontation. But just then the clinic door burst open, the bell jingling. A man stepped in, tall in a white coat, hair neatly combed. He smiled warmly at Lila. "Lila, you done yet? It's our 1-year anniversary. Booked a table at your favorite restaurant." Time stopped. I turned back, staring at Lila with questioning, stunned eyes, waiting for an explanation, any sign I'd misheard. But she just stood there, face ashen, avoiding my gaze, then quickly turning to the man and whispering something. I caught fragments. "He's just a difficult old patient. It's nothing." My mind exploded. I looked at the man, then at Lila, and in one agonizing moment, everything became clear. She had betrayed me, not just recently, but for a whole year, while I still worked myself to death, still sent money for her studies, still believed she loved me. My money, the dollars I'd saved, had likely funded this new relationship while I naively dreamed of our future. The man glanced at me, curious but silent. I stood there, stunned, feeling the world collapse around me. I looked at Lila, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to ask why, how long she'd been lying, how she'd used me. But I couldn't speak. I just turned, walked out of the clinic, the bell jingling like a final goodbye. On the cold Boston street, I wandered aimlessly, my breath forming white puffs. Everything about Lila, her promises, her letters, the moments I cherished, was truly dead inside me. She hadn't just rejected me, hadn't just turned me into a ghost in her story. She had betrayed me, using what I gave her to build a new life with someone else. I gripped the ring in my pocket, the cold metal biting into my palm. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew one thing. Lila Westbrook, the girl I once loved more than myself, had become a stranger. And I, Colton Reed, would not let her keep living on the lies built from my broken heart. In the days following the confrontation at Westbrook Family Care, I wandered like a lost soul. Lila's image, her cold eyes and mocking words, a floor cleaner, echoed in my head, sharp as knives. I lost my appetite, lost sleep, and could only walk the frigid streets of Boston, trying to soothe the rage and pain strangling my heart. Now she was hailed as a symbol of resilience, while I was buried in her fabricated tale of the fiancé who passed away. I knew I had to stand up, not for revenge, but to restore the truth. I began tracking her, not obsessively, but to understand how far her lies had spread. I scrolled through social media, reading every post, every comment praising her. Lila hadn't stopped at the clinic. She kept playing the grieving woman, skillfully retelling her story in interviews and emotional posts. She spoke of her fiancé with a choked voice, saying she did it all to make him proud, even though he was no longer here. Every word was a fresh cut, but I refused to drown in the pain. Then one day, a post stopped my heart. Lila shared a photo of herself in a stunning white dress, standing beside a tall, handsome man in an elegant black suit. The caption was short, but dramatic. He gave me the light to start over. I lost everything, but now I've found true love. We're getting married next month. The man, I recognized him instantly, was the one who walked into the clinic that day. The boyfriend she'd secretly been with for a year. His name was Adrian Clark, a wealthy doctor at a prestigious Boston hospital. To Lila, he was her whole world, the one helping her overcome loss. To me, he was living proof of her betrayal. Time passed and I heard about their wedding. Lila didn't settle for a simple ceremony. She turned it into a grand spectacle, a perfectly staged tragedy to draw tears from everyone. Social media overflowed with congratulations. Posts called Lila the epitome of resilience and love. People shared photos of her in her wedding dress, standing beside Adrian, both beaming under the glittering lights of a luxury hotel in downtown Boston. I looked at those pictures and anger surged, not from jealousy but from injustice. Lila had built her entire world on lies, on my broken heart, and now she was celebrated as a heroine while I was erased from her life. I couldn't let this continue. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted the truth exposed. I spent the following days gathering evidence. Bills, receipts, handwritten letters, old messages from Lila thanking me for my support. I printed every document and carefully placed them in a large envelope. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with them, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let Lila keep basking in the false glory she'd built on betrayal. As Lila and Adrian's wedding day approached, I decided to act. I knew this was my only chance for the world to see her true face. I didn't want to cause a scene or appear petty. I just wanted the truth spoken, not for me but for the years I'd sacrificed, for the love I'd believed was real. The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment flipping through the evidence, imagining the moment I'd walk into the banquet hall and face Lila. I didn't know how she'd react or what Adrian would think when he learned the truth. But I knew no matter the outcome, I had to do this. Not to destroy her, but to reclaim myself. Colton Reed, the man who loved with all his heart and would no longer let himself be buried under her hypocrisy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow I would appear at Lila's wedding, carrying all the evidence, and let the truth speak for itself. The next morning I put on my only decent outfit, a white shirt with a frayed collar. I grabbed the envelope, left my apartment, and walked to downtown Boston. The wedding was at the Regal Grand, a luxurious hotel where someone like me only ever came to mop floors, not as a guest. Standing before the building, gazing at the marble columns and glittering lights, I felt out of place, like an outsider in Lila's glamorous world. But I didn't hesitate. I took a deep breath, gripped the envelope tightly, and stepped through the grand glass doors. Inside, the banquet hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Guests in suits and gowns laughed and chatted, raising glasses of sparkling wine. A band played soft love songs, and at the center of the hall, a large screen displayed images of Lila and Adrian. She in a pristine white wedding dress. He in a sharp black tuxedo, both smiling like a fairy tale couple. I stood in a corner near the entrance, feeling like a ghost in my own story. The MC took the stage, his warm voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, today is special not only for the love of Lila Westbrook and Adrian Clark, but for their inspiring story. Lila, a young doctor, overcame life's greatest losses, the tragic accident that took her fiancé and caring for her ailing parents. Yet she rose again, with Adrian's support becoming the light in her life. Today we witness their love, a testament to resilience and hope. The room erupted in applause. Some guests wiped tears. I stood there, my blood boiling. Lila's lies, the story she built from my broken heart, were now celebrated by the world. I looked at the stage. Lila in her magnificent wedding gown, her glossy brown hair intricately braided, her smile radiant but calculated. Adrian stood beside her, eyes tender, utterly unaware that the woman he loved had built her happiness on a cruel lie. As the MC invited them to exchange rings, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath, clutched the envelope, and pushed open the main hall doors. They swung wide with a loud bang, echoing in the sudden silence. The room froze. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. Lila, holding the wedding ring, spun around. Seeing me, her face went ashen, her trembling hands dropping the ring to the floor with a sharp clink. Adrian stared at me, bewildered, as if wondering why a stranger had invaded this sacred moment. I strode forward, my old shoes squeaking on the marble floor, eyes locked on Lila. She stood rigid, lips pressed tight, trying to stay composed, but panic filled her eyes. I approached the stage, said nothing, and handed the brown envelope to Adrian. "You should see this," I said, my voice low but clear, resonating in the silent hall. Adrian frowned, took the envelope, and glanced between me and Lila. He opened it, pulling out a stack of papers. Photos of Lila and me from happier days. Messages thanking me for sending money. Bank statements showing transfers from my account to hers. He scanned each page, his face shifting from surprise to confusion, then to a pain I could feel from afar. "What is this?" Adrian asked, his voice shaking, eyes still on the papers. "Lila, what's going on?" Lila opened her mouth, but no words came. She trembled, eyes darting over the crowd, searching for an escape. I stepped forward, looked her in the eye, and said simply, "This is the man she said was dead. I'm Colton Reed, the one who loved her, paid her tuition, worked day and night so she could become a doctor. I didn't die in any accident. I'm right here. And this is the truth." The hall fell into a deathly silence, then erupted in chaos. Guests edged closer, curious about the papers in Adrian's hands. A woman picked up an old photo of Lila and me in a park. She beaming beside me, I in my familiar baseball cap. Another read aloud one of Lila's messages. "Colton, thank you for sending the money this month. I don't know what I'd do without you." Whispers spread. Some pulled out phones, filming the moment. The atmosphere turned electric, like a storm about to break. Adrian looked up at Lila, eyes filled with betrayal and hurt. "Lila," he said, voice low but cutting. "Say something. Tell me this isn't true." Lila shook, trying to speak, but only stuttered fragments. "Adrian, I can explain." She reached for his hand, but he yanked it away as if touching her was unbearable. "Explain?" Adrian snarled, gripping the wedding ring. "You said he was dead, Lila. You said you lost everything, that I helped you rise again. But this? You lied to me, to everyone." All eyes fixed on Lila. She stood in her stunning gown but looked small and fragile, like a cornered animal. She glared at me, anger mixing with desperation, but I felt nothing but emptiness. I didn't need to say more. The truth spoke for itself. Adrian stepped toward Lila, eyes red. He hurled the wedding ring to the floor. It clanged against the marble, a final knife severing everything. The ring rolled away, glinting under the chandeliers, and Lila collapsed to her knees, reaching for it, but it was out of reach. Adrian turned and walked off the stage without looking back. Guests stood silent. Some whispered, others kept filming as Lila's fairy tale crumbled. I stood there, watching Lila kneel on the floor, tears streaming down her face, but I felt no triumph, only hollowness, as if every emotion I'd carried had been drained. I turned, walked out of the banquet hall, no explanations, no glances back. The door's bell jingled as I left, blending with the crowd's murmurs behind me. The fairy tale Lila had meticulously built collapsed in minutes. I didn't need to shout or threaten. My presence and the evidence in the envelope were enough to expose her true face. I stepped onto the street, Boston's lights still blazing, but something inside me felt freed. I was no longer a ghost in her story. I was Colton Reed, and the truth at last had spoken for itself. As I stepped out of the regal grand banquet hall, Boston's lights still blazed, but inside me a chapter of memories had closed. The image of Lila collapsing to the floor beside the rolling wedding ring didn't bring triumph. It left only a cold void where my love for her once lived. I didn't look back, didn't need to hear the crowd's whispers or see Adrian's disillusioned gaze. I had done what I needed, not for revenge, but to reclaim the truth. To stop being a ghost in the story she'd fabricated. I walked the chilly streets, the paper envelope now lighter in my hand, but my heart still heavy. I didn't know where I'd go next, only that, for the first time in months, I could breathe again. In the days after the wedding, Boston exploded with the story of Lila Westbrook. Social media overflowed with videos and posts of the moment I entered the hall, the evidence I presented, and Lila's ashen face as the truth unraveled. Local news dubbed it the resilient young doctor's wedding scandal. Comments split into two camps, one condemning Lila for her lies, the other debating whether she deserved ruin for a harmless fib. But to me, it wasn't harmless. It was betrayal, not just of me, but of everyone who believed her fairy tale. Lila vanished from the spotlight. She locked her social media, ignored interviews, and stopped showing up at Westbrook Family Care. I heard she'd hired someone to manage the clinic while she hid in a suburban Boston apartment, dodging calls and curious stares. Part of me wondered if she felt remorse or was just fleeing a truth she couldn't face. But I didn't dwell on it. I'd done what I had to, and now I just wanted to live, even if only as a janitor with night shifts in a tiny South Boston apartment. One evening, 2 weeks after the wedding, I sat in my apartment, streetlights casting shadows through the window onto the old wooden table. On it was a small wooden box holding relics of the past. Lila's handwritten letters, scribbled notes, photos of us from when we were in love. I rarely opened it, but that night I needed to look. Not to hurt, but to remind myself I'd loved with all my heart, even if that love was now ashes. A sudden, urgent knock at the door snapped me from my thoughts. I frowned. No one visited this late. Opening the door, I froze. Lila stood there in a thin gray coat, hair disheveled, face pale, stripped of the radiant doctor Boston once adored. Her eyes were red from crying, but burned with anger and desperation. "What are you doing here, Lila?" I asked calmly, though my heart raced. I hadn't expected to see her again, not after everything. She didn't answer, just stormed inside, fists clenched as if holding back a tempest. "Why did you do this to me, Colton?" she shouted, voice breaking with rage and pain. "You ruined my life. You walked into my wedding, exposed everything in front of everyone. Do you know what I am now? A liar, despised by the world." I stood still, watching her. Part of me wanted to yell back, to remind her she'd betrayed me, turned me into a dead man for sympathy. But I didn't. I sat down, calm, meeting her eyes without hatred. "Lila," I said, voice low, "I didn't ruin your life. You did that when you chose to lie, when you used me to build your story." She shook her head, stepping closer, pointing at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to be hated by everyone. I just wanted to be seen, Colton. I wanted people to see me as successful, not the poor girl from Pittsfield, not the girl who loved a janitor. Do you know how hard I fought to escape that shadow?" I stayed silent, letting her pour out what she'd bottled up. She screamed, voice shattering, "I didn't want to live forever in your world, cramped apartments, days with no future. I wanted more, Colton. I deserved more." I looked at her, the girl who was once my everything, now broken and desperate before me. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to be someone else's idea of success, that I'd loved her as Lila, the one who held my hand in the rain, who wrote thank you notes in messy handwriting. But I said nothing. I just stood there, letting her scream, cry, and unleash what had broken her. Then, in a moment, her eyes fell on the open wooden box. Inside were cards for special days, old photos of us. She walked over, drawn like a moth, and picked up a Christmas card. Her hands trembled as she read her own words. "Colton, thank you for being there. I promise one day I'll make you proud." She glanced at other cards, photos of us in parks, rainy Boston afternoons, and stood frozen, tears falling endlessly. She collapsed into a chair, the card slipping from her hand, face soaked. "Colton," she whispered, voice choking, I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to escape it all. I thought if I said you were dead, I could start over, become who I wanted. But I was wrong. I was wrong." I looked at her, my heart aching, not with pain, but with deep sadness. The woman before me wasn't the arrogant Lila from the clinic or the dazzling bride in her gown. She was just a lost woman carrying shame and regret no one could erase. I stood, stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "Layla," I said softly, "the truth has set us both free. I don't hate you. I just want you to know the only person who ever truly loved you is the one you betrayed. Now go." She looked up, eyes tear-filled, but said nothing. She stood, slowly walked out, face still wet. The door closed behind her, soft but final, like a period at the end of our story. That was the last time I saw Lila, a woman who once had everything, now adrift in Boston, carrying regret no one could soothe. I sat back in the apartment, streetlights still glowing through the window, illuminating the wooden box. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I felt a strange calm, as if I'd finally let go of the past's weight. Leela was gone, and with her, the fake world she'd built. I didn't know what she'd do next, but I knew I was no longer part of her story. I picked up the last card she wrote, reading the scribbled line, "Colton, I promise I'll make you proud." I smiled, not with joy, but with realization. I didn't need her to feel proud. I was Colton Reed, a janitor who loved with all his heart, and now learning to live for myself. After the night Lila walked out of my apartment, her face streaked with tears and carrying wordless regret, I heard nothing more about her. Boston, the city that once hailed her as a symbol of resilience, turned its back on her as swiftly as it had lifted her up. Social media overflowed with posts and videos about the doctor who fabricated her fiancé's death. Images of Lila collapsing beside the rolling wedding ring. Her panicked eyes as the truth emerged became endless fodder for gossip. Local news called it Boston's biggest scandal of the year, and every article, every comment was another knife into the reputation Lila had meticulously built. In the weeks after the wedding, Westbrook Family Care became a forgotten name. Donors who had generously given, moved by Lila's overcoming loss story, withdrew en masse, calling it a betrayal of trust. Sponsorships, interview invitations, charity events, all vanished as if they'd never existed. Patients who once visited out of admiration for her tale refused to return, leaving the pristine hallways empty, echoing only with failure. I heard the Massachusetts Board of Medicine temporarily revoked Lila's license for ethical violations through fraudulent fundraising and false statements. The clinic shut down. The Westbrook Family Care sign was removed, leaving a scar-like void on the wall. Lila, once Harvard Medical School's shining star, became the center of criticism and mockery. Online articles branded her the white coat fraud, and vicious comments spread, from former admirers to opportunists jumping on the outrage. Adrian Clark, the light in Lila's fabricated story, cut all contact. His prominent Boston family publicly announced the broken engagement in a brief, cutting local paper statement. "We do not tolerate deception in our family." Lila was left alone, losing not just the love she'd exploited, but the elite world she'd clawed her way into. I imagined her in some dim suburban apartment, facing what she'd wrought. I felt no joy, no pity. She'd chosen her path, now she faced the consequences. Time passed, and I heard Lila left Boston for a small town in suburban Massachusetts. She worked at a modest community clinic. No spotlight, no press, no fame. I didn't know how she lived, whether she still carried her old arrogance or had learned to face herself. But I no longer thought much about her. Lila became part of the past, like the old letters in the wooden box, like the engagement ring I kept but no longer opened. I didn't stay in South Boston long either. The cramped apartment with moldy walls and streetlight glow through the window was too heavy a reminder of the years I lived for Lila. I wanted a fresh start. Not to escape, but to rediscover myself. Colton Reed, not the deceased fiancé, not the betrayed janitor, just a man seeking a simple, honest life. I moved to Maine, a small coastal town where the salty ocean air soothed my scars. I found work as a mechanical repair technician for a local company. The job wasn't glamorous, but it suited me. Days disassembling machines, fixing engines, ending with afternoons by the shore, watching waves crash on rocks. I rented a small house not unlike my old South Boston apartment, but here I felt peace. No more sleepless nights over money, no more dreams of a future that wasn't mine. Occasionally I volunteered in town, repairing homes for struggling families or teaching kids to fix bikes. These small acts brought joy I hadn't found in the years living for Lila. I smiled more, realizing I didn't need anyone else to prove my worth. I was Colton Reed, and that was enough. One day, a local reporter tracked me down wanting a story about the man who exposed Boston's scandal. I didn't want to revisit the past, but she persisted, and I agreed to a short interview. She asked about my history, Lila the wedding. I looked out the window at sunlight glinting on waves and said simply, "Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone deserves to learn to live better after falling." The reporter looked surprised, as if expecting bitterness or triumph. But I had neither. I no longer hated Lila. I felt only calm, as if I'd reclaimed my own peace. Lila had her path. I had mine. We no longer belonged to each other, and that to me was liberation. I stood on Maine's shore, wind whipping my hair, carrying salt and freedom. I pulled the engagement ring from my pocket for the first time in months. It still gleamed, but no longer weighed me down. I looked at it, remembering dreams of a future with Lila, and smiled. Not in pain, but in knowing I'd moved on. I tossed it into the sea, watching it sparkle once before sinking into the waves. It wasn't dramatic release, just a simple act, like the life I now lived. Boston, Lila, and all the past's pain were now faint streaks in my memory, like streetlights through my old apartment window. I returned to my small house, ready for tomorrow's shift, and for the first time in years I felt I truly belonged. A life unglamorous but mine, and I was content. I stood on Maine's shore, waves lapping steadily against gray rocks, carrying the salty tang mingled with the pale afternoon sun. The engagement ring now lay somewhere on the ocean floor, no longer brushing my chest daily. I breathed deeply, my chest light, as if I'd shed a memory I'd clung to too tightly. Boston, Lila, and all the past's pain were now faint glimmers, like streetlights through my old South Boston apartment window. I, Colton Reed, had found myself again, not through revenge or victory, but through the simple peace of a new life. I learned that love is not blind sacrifice, but sincerity and mutual respect. Lila chose her path, and I hold no grudge against her for it. I only know that I have chosen mine, a simple path, but one rich with meaning. I need no fame, no spotlight. I need only peaceful days where I can be myself, not a ghost in someone else's story. One evening, returning to my rented house, I opened the old wooden box where I once kept Lila's letters. I took them out, not to reread, but to burn them. I carried the box to the shore, lit each letter beneath the moonlight, and watched the flames lick across the scribbled lines. It was not an act of anger, but a final ritual to close the past. When the fire died, I stood, gazed at the sea, and smiled. I no longer needed those letters nor those memories to define me. I am Colton Reed, a man who was once a janitor, who once loved with all his heart, and who now lives for himself. If anyone asks me the greatest lesson of my life, I will say, love, but never lose yourself. Forgive, but never forget your worth. And live, because every day is a chance to reclaim the peace you deserve. I walked home, moonlight illuminating the narrow path. Boston. Lila and everything from the past are now far away, like waves dissolving into the ocean. And I, for the first time in years, feel truly free.